So good evening, everyone, and good afternoon. I know some of you are joining us from the West Coast and anywhere in between. So we're really having an event that bridges both coasts and, again, anything in between. So I'm very happy for that. My name is Irene Porro. I am a director of the Krista McCullough Center for Integrated Science Learning at Framingham State University. I'm also the lead for the Metro West STEM Education Network, that is the organizer of this event for Massachusetts STEM Week 2021. STEM Week is organized by the Massachusetts Executive Office of Education and the STEM Advisory Council in partnership with the state's 9 regional STEM networks, like our Metro West network, which plan and coordinate activities with local school communities, community leaders, and business partners. Today, I'm truly delighted to let you know that we have a very special guest to help us get this session really underway. It is my pleasure to introduce our Lieutenant Governor, Karen Polito, who has been one of the strongest advocates for Massachusetts STEM Week from the real start. Lieutenant Governor.
Thank you, Irene. It's great to see you tonight. I miss seeing you in person. But it's great that we can get together with our friends on the West Coast, not just Western Mass, but the West Coast of our country. And I was saying before we all got together on this call that there are not many silver linings from this last year and a half, but one way to really connect a lot of people with distance between is through this format. So we are thrilled that through Irene and the Metro West STEM Council and our friends at Framingham State University, we are going to hear about the Global Oneness Project. And Cleary Vaughan-Lee, who is with us, has a lot of great information to share with us, and it will continue to inspire all of us around how to engage students in STEM education and make it relevant and meaningful, and be able to allow them to think about how they can use their skills in a mission-driven way around addressing climate resiliency, sustainability, and doing their part. Of course, thank you all for doing your part over the course of this past year. It is great to be in person in our classrooms for this STEM week. It is our 4th annual STEM week, and members of the STEM Advisory Council have worked hard each year to make these opportunities available to us to examine firsthand what's going on in our classrooms. I am overwhelmed with the amazing talent and dedication of our teachers throughout our Commonwealth. We have over 1,000 events this week in 500 schools at a minimum that we know of, engaging 30,000 students with these hands-on activities. One of the things I want to acknowledge is that Cleary is going to talk about the Global Oneness Project. And I asked her, I said, what is your target student audience? And she said it's from early education to college and beyond. They were all learners, and she has a way of interacting with different ages with her projects. That's really interesting. Today, I was able to get into see the classrooms of some of our earliest learners, age around 2.9, 3, 4, 5 years old. And one of the things that I witnessed are teachers making it so interesting for these kids that they're having so much fun, but at the same time, they're learning skills around problem solving, trying things, curiosity, and developing a comfort level with a process around discovery and not being afraid to try things and try again at such an early level. And that is so critical to the STEM education and pathways that we promote here in our Commonwealth. And the other piece of what we're trying to do here through the Advisory Council is to obviously recognize that we here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts have an enormous responsibility as stewards of our innovation economy, and to make sure that we are allowing students and learners all through their K through 12 education or pre-K through 12 education and adults looking to transition into new careers, that we break down the barriers. You know, pre-pandemic, we had workforce skills gaps, achievement gaps, and opportunity gaps. And unfortunately, the pandemic has exacerbated those conditions. So it's even more important that we double down on our work. Here in Massachusetts, we have about 600,000 people employed in jobs that are part of a STEM industry. The whole innovation economy represents about 40% of our workforce. Since last year, STEM jobs have grown at a rate of around 18%. And they project, and this is outlined in the Commonwealth Core report that was released this week, that STEM jobs will grow at a rate of 7.5% more than non-STEM jobs, which grow at around 3%. So clearly we have jobs that are growing, but in order for us to continue to hold that innovation economy and continue to expand the industry sectors that are part of it and emerging, we need the talent to drive it. And that starts with the earliest of our learners and building on that, the foundational skills all the way through. And that's why this week we are also releasing our dashboard. It's at mass.gov, and we have a dashboard that will literally display what STEM education looks like in our Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Literally, you can click on a community and see what kinds of programs they have in their schools. We at the STEM Advisory Council promote applied learning, like the Museum of Science curriculum, I2 Learning, Project Lead the Way. We have design challenges in many of our schools this week where kids are engaged in projects and problem solving all through this week. But that is critical for that curriculum to be more broadly represented across our Commonwealth. And when you look at the map that's on the dashboard, you'll see that there are gaps that we need to fill. And that will require us to engage not only government to help provide resource with local school districts, but also the private sector that's always looking for ways to partner with our schools to strengthen the quality of our education. We also know that we have career technical institutes to allow kids and adults to engage in credential programs that could be 4 to 6 months and allow them to obtain a credential that is directly related to an industry in need of that particular skill area. We also have innovation career pathways where kids can start designing their coursework in 8th grade, 9th grade, so that they're not graduating from high school and wondering what they can possibly do with their education, but they're planning for it way ahead of time. And these innovation career pathways lead to jobs and careers in these industry sectors that are part of our innovation economy. And then clearly early college, starting to earn credits toward a community college or a 4-year degree, breaks down the costs associated with obtaining higher degrees. And anything we can do to help students be able to understand and relate why they're studying certain principles and subjects in schools to what their future job and career could be is critically important. Apprenticeships, mentorships, internships, and through our STEM Summit, asking employers to just start. Inspire a STEM start means start to think about how you can showcase what's happening in your workplace. It could be a virtual tour. It could be an internship, a mentorship, just an experience with students in your community to show them what your workplace looks like. And then finally, I just want to say to the STEM networks all across the Commonwealth, you've done an amazing job identifying what STEM looks like in your region. And we wanted an opportunity this week to showcase it once again. But as we know, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, STEM is just not 1 week, STEM is every day. And we fully embrace what this education needs to be in order to continue to hold that incredible title of having the most innovative economy in the country. We're pretty particular about that. And we've got to be a little bit selfish about the talent development business that we're in and work hard to retain this talent to help us continue to solve and discover and innovate around important challenges that exist today and clearly will be part of our future. So just thank you for the opportunity to be with you from this event tonight. I'm at Gillette. You can see it in the back. We have our STEM Teacher of the Year to honor. She'll be receiving a grant from the Kraft Foundation for her school in Fitchburg. So we're just very grateful for all that is happening here in our education system, and very grateful for the dedicated people that go to work every day to help our kids have an amazing experience. Thank you, RNA, for the opportunity to say a few words tonight.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. And indeed, if we need to address issues of sustainability and environmental challenges, innovation and creativity are really key for the work that we have ahead of us. So very briefly, I'd like to introduce now our speaker tonight, Cleary Vaughan-Lee. Cleary is the Executive Director of the Global Oneness Project. She's particularly interested in integrating a humanistic lens with universal values into educational content, asking local to global questions about culture and the living world. Cleary documents ways digital storytelling can be used in the classroom, highlighting teachers and students' voices. She conducts teacher and students workshops across the country and presents at regional, national, and international conferences. The Global Oneness Project's films and lessons have been featured on National Geographic, PBS, The Atlantic, The New York Times, The New Yorker, TED-Ed, and the Smithsonian, among others. Anyway, without further ado, Cleary, the mic is all yours.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor, for your words and putting STEM Week in context on many levels. I agree with what you have said about kind of fostering curiosity and kind of looking at ways in which we can challenge students to become problem solvers. And that's one of the things that I'll be talking about today. So welcome everyone. And if you're joining, please do use the chat box. Let me know where you're from, what you're doing. I'd love to hear where you're joining in from and what brings you to the session. To see somebody joining from Australia, so welcome. Briefly, so I'm Cleary Vaughan-Lee. I live here in Inverness, California. It's located about an hour-and-a-half north drive from San Francisco. And we are located on the ancestral lands of the Coast Miwok people, which is in present-day Marin County here. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen so I can share the things that I have prepared today. One moment. So today we're going to be talking about changing ecosystems, tools to engage students. And I wanted to start off by telling you a story. This is a man named Edison Dardar, and he lives on the Illidan Charles. He lives on this tiny island in Louisiana. He was born on the island. He made a living catching shrimp in the nearby waters for many, many years, and he now only catches enough shrimp for his family. So over the last few decades, his home has moved due to the increasing hurricanes and storms. So during Hurricane Andrew in 1992, the home that he built literally was on these 3-foot risers and moved to the middle of the road. Now, to give you a sense of that, this is what the Illidan Charles looks like. There's one road in and out. And so for over 170 years, it's been a historical homeland and burial ground of the state-recognized tribe of the Illidan Charles Band of Biloxi, Chitimacha, Choctaw natives. At one point, just to put this into perspective, the island was over 5 miles wide, 11 miles long. So over time, that has shrunk to now it's 2 miles wide and 1/4 mile long. So just put that into perspective a little more, I want to share this very short clip from the U.S. Geological Survey. Let's watch that.
A USGS report estimates that Louisiana lost over 5,000 square kilometers of land from 1932 to 2016. Marshland, which served as protection against storms, has been carved up for oil and gas production, leaving it open to saltwater intrusion. These factors have an immediate effect on Isle de Jean Charles, about 75 miles south of New Orleans. The island has lost 98% of its landmass since the 50s. Once 5 miles wide, barely a half square mile of the island remains above water. Landsat's 30-meter resolution shows the land loss to the wider Delta region, and a high-resolution aerial photo from 1963 and a Sentinel-2 image from 2017 show the change more closely.
So, as we just witnessed in the video, it's striking to see this change in landmass. And I just wanted to put up these two photographs so you can see them, kind of not moving images, but still images, just to see the striking change between these two time periods. So basically, the island has lost the size of Delaware from the year 1932 to 2000. As the video shared, it's 80 miles southwest of New Orleans. And so we've witnessed over this time sea level rise, coastal erosion, and this has been intensified by oil and gas canals and climate change. This is a photograph from a resident's home after one of the hurricanes, I think in the 50s. This is a screenshot from our film Illidan Charles, which features Edison Dardar. Now let's skip ahead. So this is a photograph of Illidan Charles a week before Hurricane Ida, this past August. Here it is a week later after the hurricane. Now you can see that many of the homes, I'm going to put them side to side, have been decimated. So out of the 350 people that once lived there on the island, at one point 30 residents remained. Today, after Hurricane Ida, only 10. So as we the last we heard, Edison and his wife Elizabeth returned to their home after Hurricane Ida. Their home was severely damaged. They're living now under a tarp under their home. And as of a couple weeks ago, they still did not have power. So that just gives you some perspective of a place and how it has shifted so quickly. Now, Elizabeth Rush wrote this incredible book called Rising, Dispatches from the New American Shore. It was a Pulitzer Prize finalist in general nonfiction 2 years ago. This is pretty incredible to think about. The loss, she writes, is pronounced enough that a few years ago, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration had to remap the nearby Plaquemines Parish, and in doing so, removed 31 place names. Now, what does that mean? That means that the following names are no longer exist. Yellow Cotton Bay, English Bay, Dry Cypress Bayou. Now, these are names of bodies of water. These are individual bodies of water that no longer exist. So the wetland that once gave them shape have disintegrated, and making the bayous and their ways indistinguishable from the surrounding ocean. So you can find a couple of Elizabeth Rush's essays on our website. So I wanted to start with that story because this is kind of an overview what I'm going to be sharing in our time together. But so how can we learn from stories as teachers and students? And why is it important for students to learn about people like Edison and places like Illidan Charles? These are some of the questions I'm asking. So how are we shaped by place? How can we put more people and places on the map for students to learn about the impacts of climate change and shifting ecosystems? Because as we know, when as I just shared with these bodies of water that are no longer there, what actually happens? What cultural traditions are tied to local ecosystems? And how are those threatened? How are communities threatened? How are their traditions threatened? So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that. I'm going to be sharing a little bit of some tools as well that you can kind of take back to the classroom, and also share a little bit of some student voices and student work that from projects that we've created over the last year and a half. And their work really illuminates wide ranges of topics, including COVID, because anything students do now is COVID related. And of course, how they're witnessing, what are they witnessing due to climate change? And students innately also document their cultural heritage and how it's connected to place. So just to give you a very brief overview of the Global Oneness Project, for those of you who are new, we're a nonprofit and we provide free resources for educators. Everything that you see here today are free and you can access them all on our website. So we lie at the intersection of storytelling and education, and we have a very rich library of curricula for elementary to high school. We have documentary films, and we also have photography and essays. And all of those stories, like the one I just shared, really explore social, cultural, and environmental issues from around the world. So just to give you a brief snapshot of the kinds of stories we tell, I'm going to share a very short video clip. These are clips from our films over the last few years.
No one on this earth knows the oldest language in the world. But this understanding of the universe is bound within your language. He said,
Hai bà sinh chị ở đây cứ giống kiểu đôi chia mà nu đã mình tạ sinh nhiên ở miền chiết xa hay ở miền ba lần này trong chơi.
100 years ago, the highland was one big continuous forest. It is a church who has protected this forest and who has safeguarded them from destruction.
People will change, the weather will change. If there's no more salmon, there will be no more work, I know.
Growing up in Stratford was a wonderful thing as a child. The canals were always filled with water. You don't start thinking about reality until you start seeing the writing on the wall.
Yes, I'm living in an area where, you know, I'm prone to hurricanes. But nowadays, who's not prone to hurricanes?
There's a whole healing that needs to be done, not just environmentally, but spiritually and culturally as well.
If one falls, we all fall. If one falls, we all fall. If one falls, we all fall.
Freedom before I came here was just another word. I'd never been to prison before.
Mom is our last fluent speaker now.
Will you help me? I just want to hear my family speak the language again.
You know, my father and his parents, they did not want to share the language like we're sharing it at this time with everybody. Are you kidding? They would not want to see that camera. You couldn't even step on that property. They'd be throwing rocks at you.
We live in a world with many ways of knowing, with many different systems of knowledge.
There is some deep internal intelligence, some almost non-verbal narrative which nourishes us, which has its own natural wellspring.
We've been spending all these revolutions looking at the moon. Then as we come around, we look up and there's the Earth. And everything we held dear, our families, our country, everything we held dear was back on that blue planet. How in the world could this little ball exist in this vast universe of nothing?
I want everyone to realize how tremendous, how beautiful it is to offer people a place to call home. I am one of the ones lucky enough to come back from the dead to tell their stories with the rest of the world.
So stories can really act as a roadmap. They can provide ways to think about changing landscapes around the world. The story of Edison, the one that we learned about earlier, or any individual or community can be highlighted as a case study in the classroom. One story can provide an entry point while providing an emotional connection to climate change. So many of the stories we tell at the Global Oneness Project document Indigenous individuals and communities, both the changes that they're experiencing and witnesses, and also their ways of knowing. So as we saw in this short clip, languages and landscapes are intertwined. Sadly, there were two Native individuals that were highlighted in this clip that you saw, which were from two different stories we've told over the years, and just in this last year, they have passed. So ecosystems are rapidly changing, as we know, due to climate change. And as we learned with Edison's story, just in the span of 50 years, his home is underwater. So in what ways can we help students navigate the changing ecosystems and climate change? So I'm going to share with you 5 tools. And these are tools that we share in our curricula, the ones that accompany our films and photography. And I'm going to walk through them with you for a little bit and then show a little bit of that in practice. So the first one is ask students to make predictions. So if you're looking at a particular photograph, and we'll do this in a second, ask students what they think the photograph, what is happening. Photographs from films can also be used in this way. The second is asking students to make observations and record evidence. This is a very STEM-related skill. But what are students witnessing in a photograph? What are they witnessing in the film itself? What and how are those evidence? How can they gather evidence from that? Thank you. Evrine, thank you. Make predictions based on previous evidence. Yes, it's a key skill. So the third, challenging students to consider the story's broader implications. So what's happening now? That's kind of what I was trying to share with Edison's story. Even though this film Illidan Charles was documented in 2012, we fast forward to today and so much has happened over that time. Not only that, there's just so much to learn about the changes taking place. So let's dive in with some research and make some different entry points and connections. How many, there's so many factors contributing to climate change, as we know. They're innumerable to name right now. The fourth is connecting the secondary resources. And what I mean by that is bringing in different pieces that are different articles and different entry points to think, just different varying ways to think about how that, it may be a similar story, but it might be something quite different than, say, the story that you're discovering at that moment. That might include also literature and poetry. So bringing in different fields and kind of making it more interdisciplinary. And then, of course, asking students to discuss and share their findings. So I wanted to share one way that we can do this. This is an example. This is a photograph. I'm not going to tell you what it is yet. It's part of a photo essay on our platform. So let's say that you're going to take an image like this and you're going to share it with your students. You're going to view an image with no information given at all. What this can do is provide students an opportunity to really activate their imaginations. So it can go back to that making a prediction of what it is. But doing it in this way can also illustrate our first impressions. So in some ways, it can lead us in one direction, but sometimes our impressions and our assumptions aren't always accurate. And that's good to know. That is good. It's a good skill to know, oh, that wasn't correct, or that wasn't what I thought it was. And this is a good activity for all ages. So here we go next. This is a way on our website where you can actually view a photo essay, but you can hide the captions if you see that on the top right corner. If you click that, it says to show the captions. So there you see the captions there. That's just a way to show you that you can actually view a photograph with no information at all. So when you then kind of pan out and start to learn more about this story, you learn that this is a place in it's in Shishmaref, Alaska. This is a photo by Cyril Jasbeck, who documents this whole town. And it's a small barrier island in the Chukchi Sea in northwestern Alaska, home to a modern Inupiaq community. It's really on the front lines of climate change. And just like Illidan Charles, just in that island, this place is also a 1/4 mile wide and 3 miles in length, also facing evacuations due to erosion and powerful storms. So here's another place on another that is in similar jeopardy like Illidan Charles. And oops, I went too fast. If we fast forward to today, because this photo essay was taken maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you consider that Shishmaref, if we dive into some research and really think about what's happening here, it's one of the most threatened communities in Alaska. So I just wanted to share that on our website, we do have a whole climate change collection, and Sarah from our team at Global Oneness Project will share that link with you in the chat box. And that contains, there it is right there, many stories and curricula that accompanies those stories. And you can kind of explore that as well. So I want to jump down, and I just, when I share additional resources and sources, many times it's connected to what I just spoke about, but there's 2 here that are more sources that are in my mind because I'm very deeply invested in them at the moment. I wanted to say that if you don't know about Project Zero, which is out of Harvard's Graduate School of Education, they have tremendous resources on thinking routines, and I would highly recommend using them with, say, for example, that photo activity. So those are just some really great ways to dive into conversations in the classroom. There's also a book by Sherry Tushman, who's also out of Harvard's Project Zero, called Slow Looking. It's a great research-based book that really dives into the whys of why we do that. And then The Power of Making Thinking Visible, another great book that explores this topic as well. Worldwise Learning is a book that a colleague of mine has just published. So I wanted to share that with all of you. And Elizabeth, if you're joining, hi. A Teacher's Guide to Shaping a Just, Sustainable Future. I highly recommend taking a look at that. And then, as I mentioned, in a lot of the work that we do connect poetry and literature to many different topics, to climate change, and it's important to do so. And I just started reading, this was published years ago, but it's a great anthology called the Eco Poetry Anthology. That I would recommend if you're looking to pair some poetry, eco-poetry connected to climate change to provide a different way of looking at the world for your students. So student voices, and I'm kind of jumping ahead, and if there's Elizabeth, hi Elizabeth. If you do we are going to be diving into questions. So if you have those, feel free to send them if it's related to anything that we're talking about now, or feel free to wait and send them later. I want to just keep going then. I talked earlier about the importance of documenting student voices. And as Irene mentioned, we have a film called Earthrise. This is the Earthrise photograph. As everybody knows, this was the first time that we witnessed our planet as one ecosystem. And I really do love this quote from Joseph Campbell, as it really gets us thinking about the lack of borders and boundaries. And what is this new mythology, or this new way of being that we can inhabit in ourselves? That's how I see it. Another thing that I just came across yesterday, which I thought I'd share, from that eco poetry anthology, which was written by, the introduction was written by Pulitzer Prize winning poet Robert Hass. He says, in relation to seeing the Earthrise photograph, he says, he describes that the poets of the second half of the 20th century, when they inherited that glimpse of the earth from space, that they also inherited this history of language, of ways of seeing the land and what happened on it. So that's another way of thinking about it too. So over the last couple of years, we decided that we want to provide ways for students to document what they're witnessing in the world. And we really got inspired by using the Earthrise photograph as an inspiration to do that. So this was one of our first projects. They also, I have to say, were contests, and that way that we had a window and students would submit their work. And but in this way, we've put them as projects, meaning that you can visit our website and see what that project is and be able to use that at any time of the year. How does the Earthrise photograph challenge students to consider our relationship to the earth and provide context for what it means to be a global citizen? That was a question we asked students, and I'm going to share you some of their work in a second. One of the other second contests that we did was called The Spirit of Reciprocity, and this was inspired by the work of Robin Wall Kimmerer. If those of you who do not know her work, she's best known for her work called Braiding Sweetgrass. Most beautiful writer. And this project really was centered around the question of how might we listen and respond to the living world in ways that honor our interconnectedness and reciprocity. So I want to share just a few of those the student work. And after that, I hope that you all have questions and thoughts to share so we can have a little bit of a conversation towards the end of this session. So percolate those. Okay, so this was a photograph taken by a 17-year-old who lives in Australia. This just so happens that he took this photograph right when the Australia wildfires were happening. He watched the film Earthrise, and this was a small statement of what he wrote about. But this was a very striking image of putting himself, or putting a human context into his photograph while documenting the ashes from the fires. This one was inspired by Robin Wall Kimmerer's work, The Spirit of Reciprocity, and this was taken not very far from my home up in Sonoma County, where the wildfires were just taking over last summer. He took this photograph with a drone, and he was sharing that this was a new skill that he had and was very excited to share. If you look really closely there, he said his mother is kind of right in the center of that photo. But it's striking for me to see this, as our home, there was a wildfire not far from our home last summer, which feels like ages ago, but another impact of a changing ecosystem. This was a photo taken by a 14-year-old, Cadence Grandel, and we were really baffled when we saw this photograph, as we couldn't really determine how or what this was. And we discovered from her photo statement goes into this in more detail. And thanks, Sarah, for posting those projects links. There's a project link in the chat if you're interested to see more of those. She actually took this photograph through binoculars of a waterfall. So that's why you see this circular context, and it's actually water. Very unique and beautiful photograph. And then the last one is a photograph taken by a 16-year-old who lives in New York. This was a very close-up of a wire basket, I think, that his father gave him from Bogota, Colombia. But he had a very striking metaphor for this basket, and that, you know, feeling hemmed in and being able to kind of be kind of all clumped together. But also, as he kind of says in his essay or statement here, this was a time when everyone was sheltering in place. So there was this sense of isolation, but he made this connection of, you know, will we nurture Earth as it is our sanctuary, which is very profound. So just to kind of share on an educator level, Mary Ellen Newport, who's a high school ecology teacher in Michigan, a lot of her students entered our projects and contests. And what was really fascinating is how she describes that doing this process, through this process of, you know, telling students to take their cameras and documenting their place, that it made visible what they were experiencing. And a lot of it had to do with relatedness and reciprocity and interconnection. And she's an ecology teacher, so there was a lot of connections to science, but on a larger kind of scale. So that's, I'm not sure what that sound is. There's an extra piece that some of you might be interested, specifically for those who are interested in examining photographs in the classroom. So we just announced a couple months ago a new student gallery, and Sarah can post that. Oh, she just did. Oops, too fast. So what this does is we've put all the student photographs in one place, and it enables you to be able to take a photograph and view it in the way that I shared earlier, with no captions and no information. And we also include information about Project Zero's See, Think, Wonder visible thinking routine. And I've piloted this with different audiences over the last 6 months. And it's very, every time, because those questions from Project Zero, for those of you who are unfamiliar, are incredibly simple. What do you see? What makes you say that? And what do you wonder? Well, those 3 questions are intended to be incredibly simple, but the stories that come from that and the observations that come from that, and this is intended for, well, we did this in small group discussions. So having students pair up, look at one particular photograph. For example, if you look at this one in the middle of the chair in the water, and many of people, you know, see that as a metaphor for where we are today with learning during COVID. Some are making connections to climate change, but there's just a lot of different ways to think about images, because they're all subjective, just like stories are. We see things in different ways as we have our own life experiences. So that is a gallery that is intended to have meaningful conversations. And so I really do want to, we have 15 minutes. I really want to open this up for conversation. I'd love to hear from all of you. If you have any questions about what has been shared, or perhaps you have some ideas in how you are working in your learning environment and how you might be sharing ways for learning and teaching about changing ecosystems. That would be also something I'd love to hear too. Thank you, Laura, for your nice message. I appreciate that. So as we kind of percolate, maybe Irene, do you have any comments or anything to share?
Well, I think I wanted to ask you maybe to tell us a little bit more, since we are focusing on STEM this week. And
Sure.
I mean, I see all the connection, but maybe talking about some of your collaboration with science teachers and how this kind of activity is really, we always talk about the intersections of its different themes, right? So how working with your project has really helped them engage their students in a new way.
Yes. That's a good question. And a lot of the projects that we do and all the stories do have those interdisciplinary connections. So I would start by saying that it's all encompassing. I worked with a science teacher over the summertime, and we kind of looked at these photographs in different capacities. And so that's one thing that I would mention is really pick and choose. You can really pick and choose what images you want to focus on. And so that's one thing. She had her students, we were piloting another project of student photography. And so her students ended up taking photographs with very specific questions that she was focusing on and relating to the work that she was doing. So trying to think of specific examples. While I kind of percolate on that, I seem to be using that word a lot. Let's move to another question and I'll come back to that. What is the best way or easiest way to teach students in secondary with disabilities? That's a great question too. We have gotten that question a lot, and I think it depends on maybe what are the disabilities. I'll just mention how we have kind of addressed that on our website. So all of the films, for example, we have closed captions. So that's a capability that you're able to add to that. All of our lessons and our films are available in Spanish. So that's just an added thing that you can access. One of the things that we recommend for kind of trying to slow down some of the learning, and I don't mean that by dumbing it down, I mean slowing it down to be able to comprehend on a slower level, which is needed, is maybe watch a film and as a whole class, and then rewatch the film, pausing the film at the intervals at which you have questions. So, for example, if you're watching the beginning of the film and this is when a certain character is being introduced, or somebody, a new concept or something, pause it there after you've already watched it the first time, pause it there and have questions. And I've been hearing feedback from teachers that this is a really helpful way this repetition is a helpful way for students to really grasp what's happening in the story, and to have the conversations kind of mixed in while you're also revisiting the content is helpful. I hope that's a helpful answer.
Yeah, actually, I realized that I wasn't thinking about asking a question to serve my purposes, but if that's okay, I realize it actually does, because I think actually clearly working with you has certainly inspired me and some of my colleagues to look at the work that we do in STEM in a different way. And so I'm actually putting here a link to an initiative we just launched for STEM Week, and it's called Perspectives of Earth, sharing our vision. Because the way, so we are actually trying to implement your approach, but because in our case, our center really focuses on space science. So we actually, in this activity, for example, we propose 5 images of planet Earth taken from space, just like, you know, Earthrise. These are usually images taken by satellites or on board the International Space Station, with a little bit of description. But now I'm thinking about hiding the description at first and deciding, you know, if we use it or not. And when we provide some prompts for discussion, but the goal is for the students to reflect on the images and bring them home, that global to local, right? Sometimes we start with the local and we'll go to the global, but in this case, we say, let's start with the global. And, you know, one of the images is about Hurricane Ida seen from space. And I just, you know, can see how all the connections here that could be made, you know, so I think that we will gradually, we want to let the students first think about hurricane. What does, you know, in the video, the gentleman said, oh yeah, I live in an area that is prone to hurricanes, but everywhere it's going. It may be not the direct impact, but the consequences, like we saw with Ida, right? So I can witness that we are doing it, trying to really implement what you're teaching us from these activities.
Thank you, Renee. Yes, I like that. And the visuals do really help kind of spark that conversation from the start. I'm going to ask Barbara to ask her question. So.
Hi, I work with children outdoors. I think that's a part of STEM ignores a lot of the outdoors work that you can do with students, especially now with COVID. We bring students outdoors and they can be without masks. They can work and they make something. They make a garden, a biodiverse garden, which with flowers, and it's the connection between climate change and biodiversity is often ignored. I've been reading and hearing about it more and more lately, but the kids see that. They see that. They see the connection and they get their hands dirty and they're out in the world. And it's different from being inside looking through microscopes or whatever, you know, the regular science. And it can't be done during the day, actually. It's got to be done after school or all summer. We work all summer with, in a business world, the students actually have clients and they design gardens and put in native plants, and bees come, thousands and thousands. Bees are all over the place, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And it's something that STEM often ignores, the outdoor experience of youth. We have 14 to 16-year-old students and college student mentors, and it's just, to me it's beautiful to see what the kids can do outdoors. And it's unlimited kinds of things that if you look at my website there, you'll see what kinds of things they have. Plant sales, they work in the business world, but your work is gorgeous and our work is just sort of like down to earth. That's different. It's very different. It's out and dirty, down and dirty kind of thing. So, but I love your program, Cleary. It's just wonderful. I'm so glad that you're having this program today. And just really excited that we are having that.
Thank you, Barbara. And I'm glad that you're mentioning this because it is important for students to have this, foster this relationship to our planet. And one of the best ways to do that is to get your hands on the earth. and to do that. And Irina, you have some thoughts to share, I think, too.
Well, I think one word that Barbara said that really resonates with me is making connections, right? So unfortunately, sometimes when we teach science or STEM in general, we teach them in their boxes. But you cannot teach about environmental issues and use your problem solver to address that using STEM without making a connection to, get your hands dirty, make a connection to the economic impact it may have for certain population, to the crisis in the culture, the losing of a tradition. So I think that is really a way to engage students. And again, I'm speaking for STEM, but when we make connections, we really empower our students to use STEM as a tool to address the issues that they care about. So they will learn STEM, but maybe we shouldn't start with STEM first. We need to start with things that they care about, they are passionate about, or they are concerned about, and then see that STEM can really be a tool in their own hands, empowers them, but not as an end in itself.
Yes, I agree. And Elizabeth, you wanted to add in?
Hi. Yes. Hi. Name's Elizabeth. I'm a teacher at high school. I teach environmental science, and it's an elective class mostly for learners who really need just a science, but they're not there because they want to be there. But we are actually connecting with the city, a nearby city, in which they've done some creek restoration work. And once the rains come, which we're praying for, we're going to be kind of monitoring the creek, the water sample. But they've also just they've restored it and got rid of all of the non-natives and brought in native species. And actually, I incorporated your Sanctuaries of Silence, the videos and the slides with this curriculum that I started. And the very first time that I brought the students to this trail and to the creek, I had them, instead of think about what they see, let's start off by what do they hear? What is it that they're listening to? And so it was really enlightening, because you have students who were actually listening to all the sounds of nature, but other students who were just tuned into the human sounds. But I didn't tell them what it was that I wanted them to listen to. I just said, let's listen. So we spent 5 minutes just sitting there listening. And it was really kind of enlightening to just have them just express themselves just based on what they heard rather than what they saw. But I just have been very appreciative of the photographs, the lessons that you've, with the Global Oneness, has provided. They've really tied in with a lot of concepts that I'm teaching in environmental science. So
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I'm glad you brought that up, because we're wrapping up here, but listening is a crucial element, of course, to science. And so, and I think that's a quality, one of the senses that I think we should be bringing more into, because as we're visually being kind of burdened, especially during COVID, and it allows us to kind of foster this other sense that is there, but I think has these qualities I really think students connect to on a deeper level. So thank you to Elizabeth Crawford. Thank you for your comment, and thank you, Linda, for your comment as well. And just reading now, I think I'm pronouncing your name, Danya, your comment as a Spanish teacher. So thank you for all of that. And so I just want to wrap up one more comment as we kind of think about students. They're already witnesses to our changing world. And the more I think that we can challenge them to step outside their doors and to listen and see and observe their local rivers and watersheds and ecosystems, the better. And I just want to end on one final comment from a student that was, her name is Rose, and she's from Michigan. And she took a photograph of up close of a bird's nest. And one of her comments, just a one line that she wrote, which I was very moved by, it kind of goes to your comment, Elizabeth, on listening, is the living world is constantly telling us what it needs, but often we don't listen. So yes, well, this has been really a great session. Thank you everyone for joining. And thank you, Irene, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Same here. We are always very happy to have you join some of our initiatives and looking forward to keep working together.
Yes, likewise. And wish everybody well.
Yeah, and thank you all for joining tonight. We have more activities for STEM Week if you want to check our website. Yeah, we are continuing actually beyond the end of the week. We always overdo things a little bit here.
And but just to say, I forgot to mention one thing. We will be having a new student contest. The details for that will be coming out in the next week or two. And the theme this time is called The State of the Planet. And it will be another photography original illustration contest. So stay tuned for that. You can sign up on our website to our newsletter. That's how we kind of announce those things. So yeah. And
Suzanne has put in the chat that she will compile the resources from this webinar. So we will send that to all of the people to sign up, and we will include that as well. Including the recording. Yes, is going to be available. If any of your colleagues couldn't be here tonight, we will send you the link with that list of resources.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Again, well, good night or good afternoon, depending on which part of the country you're in or which part of the world.
Yes.
Have a great rest of the day.
Take care.